Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from the Spencer Family, Community Health System, Harris Ranch Resort, Producers Dairy, Valley Children's Healthcare, and The Wonderful Company. Additional support provided by from the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's public universities. This is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Blake Zante.
Welcome to the Maddy Report. Today we'll be discussing the future projection of lightning-ignited wildfires, or LIW, and also how these findings are important to understand changes to LIW risk and the suppression needs in a warming climate with Professor John Abatzoglou, Professor of Climatology at the University of California, Merced. John, thanks for joining us on the Maddy Report today. Really appreciate you being on the program.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Well, I know we want to talk about the report that you were a co-author of and get into some of these findings. But to start off our discussion, for those who may not be familiar with this topic, could you just briefly explain what is this phenomenon of lightning-ignited wildfires?
Sure. So lightning is certainly one of the sort of causes of wildfires that we see here in California. Lots of ways we can start fires. It turns out that lightning is about 12% of all the fires that start in California are lightning caused. Humans start the rest, right? But lightning caused fires tend to be quite large. And so they account for about 35% of the burned area in the state. And it's exactly what we think about, right? It's a lightning strike that happens on a day where we have very dry vegetation, where that vegetation is receptive to igniting and carrying a fire. And the word dry lightning relates to the fact that that lightning event, right, that rainstorm didn't really come with rain, right? It was essentially a thunderstorm without any meaningful rainfall, typically less than 1/10 of an inch of rain, but it can be a little bit more.
And why did you begin to research, cloud to ground lightning being a major source of summer wildfires? What sort of prompted this?
Well, growing up in California, lightning was novel, right? Lightning doesn't happen very often. I kind of feel like we're lucky to get lightning. It's exciting. As a meteorologist, it's really exciting to get lightning. But as a rare phenomena, we also know that lightning can bring, right? Sometimes it can bring a lot of rain that can be beneficial, right? It can actually slow down the fire season. If you get rainstorm, right, a lightning event with rain, it'll actually tamp down fire danger. On the other hand, if you get a lightning storm with limited rainfall, that can really sort of change the course of a fire season. So lightning's always been a really interesting feature and is part of the story of sort of the changing landscapes on our lands in terms of fire.
And in your research, what were you and your colleagues really aiming to understand and address about the future risks of lightning-ignited wildfires in the western United States?
Yeah, so this work was done by a postdoctoral scholar, Dmitry Kalishnikov, and he's actually funded by the National Science Foundation. And part of his work is to understand sort of, again, the wet side and the dry side of lightning. And what he did was he took a large database of lightning strikes that we have over about 30 years and related that to a whole host of meteorological patterns to develop sort of a point-based estimate of the sort of the ingredients one would need for a lightning strike.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. We're talking with Professor John Abatzoglou from the University of California, Merced. John, why don't we dive into a little bit more deep into the methods and the data behind the study that you were a co-author of. Could you describe the study in a little bit more detail and explain the methodology that was employed by the researchers to look at what you were analyzing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have, again, a large database of lightning. About 30 years of data. We also have a database that sort of tells us about things like how steep the temperature gradient is between the lower atmosphere and higher up, things related to the atmospheric moisture content. Effectively, if you want an ingredient list for creating lightning at a specific point, we can procure that using sort of this long library of data. And from that, we can then sort of train a model to look at sort of how lightning may change in the future. And we did that using something called a large ensemble. So it's not just one model, it's 50 models. We run sort of 50 models in the future, and we can look at sort of different trajectories in terms of how lightning and lightning ignited fires might change.
And how did the study sort of come together? Maybe if you can talk about the how the origins of it, and what were some of the initial factors that were considered before you began the study, and then with this, what unexpected factors or variables emerged during the course of the study, if any?
Yeah, there's always surprises in science, right? So we always sort of set out to sort of look at a specific goal. We find some interesting things along the way. This story actually probably goes back several years. The lead author had conducted his PhD work on lightning, looking at different attributes of it. And one of the sort of outstanding questions that we really haven't had a good answer on was, how might lightning change in the future, right? We know it's sort of a rare phenomenon, especially in California. We didn't really have a great idea of how it would change, particularly in the western United States. There are lightning projections out there that are global in nature, and they typically say that it's some function of how much rain happens and some level of instability. But because we have a lot of dry lightning in the West, those sort of adages may not have necessarily sort of panned out. But it turned out that in general, we do see this sort of increase in lightning, particularly, say, from about California northward in the future.
Now, in looking at the study, we talked a little bit about some of the variables, but were there any maybe particular challenges with the study that you and your co-authors encountered? And what did this do, and how did it affect the research, if there were any obstacles?
Obstacles. I think there was a lot of data. That's not novel to this study at all. And I think one of the things that we did try to do, right, we started with just lightning alone, and we wanted to have this be slightly more interesting. So we overlaid sort of lightning occurrence with sort of how high the fire weather was. And that's how we get to this sort of coincidence of lightning coincident with high fire weather as being a day where there could possibly be lightning-started fires occurring.
Now, something on this program is we always like to find a nexus between, sort of the academic research and also the policy-making aspects and implications there. Folks, obviously there is a lot of discussion on wildfire at the moment. In mid-September right now, we're experiencing several major local fires here by the San Joaquin Valley. What are some of maybe the policy implications that could be takeaways for policymakers from your research?
Good point. Part of this was to sort of get an idea, at least going out into the future, right, of how sort of some of the ingredients for fire may be changing. We have, pretty good evidence to suggest that things will be drier in the summertime in California. The fire seasons will be longer. Those things by themselves would sort of up the ante, right, up the odds of sort of more active fire seasons. Not every season is going to be active, but what we really didn't know was necessarily how ignitions are going to change. And I will say we have no idea how human ignitions are going to change. There's actually some evidence to suggest that human ignitions are going down in California because we have policy, right? We have a variety of policies, whether it's the utilities, right? A whole bunch of technological advances have reduced human ignitions. Lightning, though, we can't necessarily blame an individual or a corporation. And so lightning is a bit of a wild card. It certainly adds to our fire season. It adds complexity to management. The series of sort of lightning-caused fires that we had in August this year, and I think early September, peppering the Central Valley and the Sierra Nevada, starting a whole bunch of fires at once. It's a lot easier for fire suppression to deal with one fire, but when you load the landscape with new starts, it becomes very, very challenging. And that's where we begin to see sort of this surge in suppression resources and our inability to actually tackle those fires. So these sort of, this analysis looking at lightning-caused fires can certainly tell us a little bit about what we might need in the future. We also know that not all fires are bad, right? And certainly there's a lot of places in the West, in national parks and wilderness areas where lightning-caused fires are actually allowed to burn, right, that are not going to threaten people.
Thank you. We're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. Now that we've looked at how the study was carried out, let's shift a little bit to some of the key findings and what they reveal. We're talking with John Abatzoglou from the University of California, Merced. John, a key finding is that cloud to ground lightning days are projected to increase across the western U.S. This is something that you sort of referenced earlier, that there could be some changes in these patterns over time. What are the potential impacts of this projected increase in cloud to ground lightning days across the western U.S. and what does this mean for us here locally in the San Joaquin Valley?
Yeah, so certainly the implication of sort of the results here that we might expect more lightning-caused fires, right? Especially if we're in an era where we have drier fuels. There's certainly ways to intervene, right, through a variety of fuel reduction strategies. In the Central Valley, we don't necessarily have fires in the valley itself that are meaningful, but we obviously deal with the smoke impacts from fires that are burning as close as sort of the Sierra foothills to as far away as possibly Oregon or Washington. And that certainly compounds the already poor air quality in our area. I think during 2020, we had some of the worst air quality given the widespread fires, lightning-caused fires that were happening in sort of around the Bay Area, further north, and we had the creek fire burning. All those things sort of drain into the valley. So smoke and the impacts that has on human health and our quality of life are certainly near and dear to us in the valley.
Now, talking about how, your research shows that lightning-ignited wildfire risk is expected to grow as high fire weather index days increasingly align with lightning days. Maybe if you could break that down for us a little bit. Folks may not know what the fire weather index is if maybe they don't live in a high risk area, they've never heard of it. What does this alignment mean, and then how could it impact wildfire risk in the greater state of California as well?
Yeah, that's right. So fire weather is certainly something that not everybody knows about. People have probably heard of red flag warnings, and that is a warning that the National Weather Service will issue when there's a suite of criteria that are met. Usually it's the fuels are really dry, vegetation's really dry, and then you have dry and windy conditions. Lightning can also be a trigger. But effectively, we're thinking of just conditions where we have really, really dry fuel and it's a hot, dry day. We have a lot of that happens in the summer here in California. You think about the recipe for a fire, right? Fuels and the weather being pretty critical. So that certainly the implications are that if we have lightning that happens when we don't have high fire danger, that may not actually result in a fire. But if they happen at the same time, right, the odds are higher that will actually catalyze a new start.
Now, there's nothing that policymakers can do, you sort of referenced this earlier, to regulate lightning, right? That's a natural weather event that occurs. Nothing that can really be done there. But, the study's findings, if you could talk a little bit about this, does the study look at the increasing risk of lightning and wildfire? And what does it tell us about maybe some of the broader implications as it relates to climate change in the Western U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, the climate change is already here. We're not waiting for it. We don't have to wait another 20 years for climate change to materialize. Outside of the lightning starts when it comes to fire, there's a lot of additional ingredients and policy that can sort of change the course in terms of how much fire we might see, how it might impact communities in not only sort of 30 years out, but maybe even 5 to 10 years out. And that relates to reducing ignitions, right, protecting these communities, making them more resilient to fire, and then also a whole host of sort of proactive measures to reduce fuels in areas to allow firefighters to stand a better chance and to stop those fires from impacting infrastructure and communities.
Thank you. We're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. John, thanks again for joining us on the program today. Really appreciate your time. Before we go, I want to talk a little bit more about why this study is important and what it means. Based on the study's overall conclusions, how might the combination of more lightning and higher fire weather risk reshape wildfire management strategies in the coming decades? And this is something that you sort of alluded to previously, but I'm just curious to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, part of our current situation, not only in California, but much of the Western United States, is that yes, we have climate change, which is extending the fire seasons, making fuels drier, but we also have a legacy of about a century of fire suppression on our landscape, which is well intended. It reduced fire activity, protected communities back in the day, but as a consequence, we now have more fuel on that landscape today. So there are certain things we can do to change that course. It is challenging to reduce the amount of fuel we have because we have a lot of it. It is not going to be solved overnight, but there are actions that can be taken to sort of decouple at least sort of this future of more fire, more lightning in this case, more lightning and drier fuels from that exactly translating into more fire, because that has negative consequences generally for populations.
And how do the findings of this research really build on, or perhaps even differ from previous research that's been conducted on lightning projections and wildfire risk?
Yeah, I think there have been a couple studies looking at sort of lightning in the future. They generally also suggest an increase in lightning, but the difference is that most lightning that happens outside of the Western United States and other places, it's wet lightning. And so they're really looking at thunderstorm potential. So we're adding that additional flavor here. Really, there haven't been many studies that have sort of looked at how changes in lightning, along with the other changes in climate and fuels, might alter sort of how we sort of see the landscape in California 20, 30, 40, 50 years out.
And lastly, that's sort of a good segue to my final question. How do these findings really expand on our understanding of the links between climate change, lightning, wildfire activity, and then what does this mean for planning ahead? Maybe what are some considerations that policymakers or people in the policymaking space could take away as they're looking ahead to try to mitigate something that is really uncontrollable to a large extent, lightning, dry lightning, but are there preparations or certain policy changes that could be undertaken to help prevent maybe a disastrous lightning-caused fire in the future?
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I think to the first point, this study is adding to a pretty long list of studies that are pointing towards continuation of the escalation of fire activity here in the West and California. Yeah, we're not going to stop lightning, right? We can't stop it today. We can, to some degree, control where the fire goes, right? And that can be done during the fire, right? We have Cal Fire in California. We have the Forest Service, collectively the largest firefighting agency in the world, and they do a great job, but they can't necessarily tackle all the fires when they start simultaneously. We can proactively try to manage our fuels in a way that'll make it harder for fires to spread to be so large, and particularly focus in areas where those fires might impact our infrastructure and communities.
Thank you. Well, John Abatzoglou, thank you so much for joining us today on the Maddy Report. Really appreciate your time and expertise.
Thank you, of course.
Thank you for tuning in to the Maddy Report. To learn more about the Maddy Institute, visit themaddyinstitute.org. What makes a community thrive? How do we bridge the gap between government and policy and the people it impacts? The Maddy Institute was founded to answer questions like these, to create a link between government and the citizens it serves, and to inspire a new generation of leaders dedicated to public service. In 1999, the California legislature unanimously established the Maddy Institute in honor of former California State Senator Kenneth L. Maddy. Senator Maddy was widely respected for his commitment to bipartisan solutions and his dedication to the people of California's Central Valley. Known for his ability to work across the aisle, Senator Maddy believed that effective government begins with respectful dialogue, evidence-based policy, and a commitment to the common good. Today, the Maddy Institute continues his legacy. Our mission is threefold. 1, to promote more effective and inclusive government, 2, to encourage civic engagement, and 3, to conduct research on key issues impacting the Central Valley. Through these efforts, we aim to educate, inspire, and empower the next generation of public servants and community leaders. One of the most impactful ways we fulfill this mission is through our internship programs. Each year, the Maddy Institute provides opportunities for students from the Central Valley to work in legislative offices, both in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., as well as local government agencies. These internships give students real-world experience in policymaking, allow them to see government in action, and help them build the skills they need to make a difference in their communities. But the Maddy Institute isn't just for students. Through our civic engagement programs, we create opportunities for everyone to participate in the political process. From community forums to workshops, we bring people together to discuss important issues facing the Central Valley, like water management, air quality, economic development, and education. These events foster open dialogue, allowing citizens to engage directly with policymakers, experts, and others, creating a stronger and more informed community. And to ensure the public stays informed, the Maddy Institute produces the Maddy Report, a weekly public affairs broadcast that covers the latest issues impacting California. Each episode features interviews with lawmakers, journalists, and subject matter experts, providing insights and analysis on topics that matter to our region. Whether it's understanding new legislation or exploring solutions to local challenges, the Maddy Report is a trusted source of information for those who want to stay engaged. At the heart of everything we do is a belief that good governance requires an informed and engaged public. From nurturing young leaders to fostering dialogue, the Maddy Institute is dedicated to creating a future where the people of the Central Valley can thrive. Join us as we continue Senator Maddy's legacy. Together, we can build a brighter future, one informed and engaged citizen at a time. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.com.